Well, hey everybody, it's Trish Murray with the New Age Tour Guide podcast. And this episode is a little bit unexpected, but not. So I was always planning to shift gears from this Age of Aquarius language into something else that was maybe a little bit more approachable for people who are maybe just not getting not comfortable with astrology, or they don't really know much about it. But I did want to share a little bit of the research, which I've been doing up until this point. And it was as I was kind of really reflecting on the research and looking at and listening to other people's perspectives about what's transpiring through this period of chaos and confusion and lots of change going on planet Earth right now, that I really started to kind of almost intuitively hear, like through meditation and whatnot, the age of authenticity, the age of authenticity. And so, like I say, this episode is a little unexpected because I was planning on going to the age of authenticity, but how I'm getting there is not how I thought I was going to get there. So, fun story. I will post a link below to the episode where I was speaking with Allie McKenzie. I was a guest on her podcast for Curious Souls, and I decided I was going to prepare a little bit differently for that conversation, and pulled 3 cards from one of my favorite decks. It's by Heather Roan Robbins. It's called the Star Codes. It's like an astrology deck, and just to see if there were some themes or conversations that ideas that could that would inform or influence, how I would show up for this conversation with Allie. And sometimes I use them, sometimes I don't. But what I really liked was the themes that came forward for this, because I think that they are very, very indicative of everything that I've been talking about as it relates to Aquarius, and where we've been coming from through Pisces and Aries, and where I feel so strongly that we're going to go, and not so much where we're going to go, but how we're going to get there, how we're going to move as individuals, as the collective, into this quote new age. And I keep using quote new age because maybe that's language that resonates with you, maybe it's not, but I'm using it as shorthand. So before I jump into that portion of the podcast where I tend to shut the video off and really invite you to tune in for what it is that you need to hear today in order to be able to shift your mind and prepare your heart and really listen for the wisdom of your soul as we're making these shifts, as we're navigating this incredibly complex world right now. I wanted to share with you each of the 3 cards that came up, so that you can have a visual in your mind as I'm talking. Now, I'm not going to share these I'm going to share them in the order that I pulled them, but when you get into the audio portion, I'm going to talk about them in a little bit of a different order, just to keep you guys on your toes, I guess. So there's the first card that came up. It's all about the 11th house, and the 11th house in astrology is where we really find themes of community, where we interface, where we as individuals interface with the collective. So you might think of in terms of small groups, associations, your network, maybe your client community, your tribe. The second card that I pulled was Juno. There you go, Juno. Sweet little birds. Juno is all about partnership, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in the podcast. I didn't know much about it, but the key to Juno and understanding kind of that theme is equal partnerships. Juno has a connection to Jupiter, but it really is about how do we get to equal partnerships. So keep that in mind as we keep going forward. And then the third card that I pulled was the first house. And Heather Roan Robbins describes this as arrival, or how we enter into the collective or into the world But other places and other people in astrology really think about the first house as ourself, our sense of self. So when you get into the audio portion, you're going to hear me talk about the first house first, and then I'm going to talk about the 11th house, and then I'm going to touch a little bit into Juno. So thanks for joining me today, and we're talking about the age of authenticity. That's where I want to start with the first house. First house, where we show up in the world, how we show up in the world, how we enter into the world, arrival. For those who are maybe just tuning into this for the very first time, the New Age podcast, New Age Tour Guide podcast, started with me really looking at this age of Aquarius through the lens of astrology, the research that I had done for myself predominantly, and what I started to share out with individuals in my community. Where I've gotten to with that is I'm really starting to talk about it more from the perspective of the age of authenticity. The age of authenticity, which is going to be, I think, even more interesting. And so when I think about authenticity, I think about transparency. I think about integrity. I think about being in alignment inside of ourselves as well as outside. So whatever our inner experience is in general is kind of what actually is showing up in the external, as opposed to really trying to put on a really, brave face or pretty picture when really inside we're kind of a hot mess. That's authenticity, is really just showing up as ourselves. And so it might be helpful to just run your astrological chart, have a look at the planets that are showing up there, what signs there, and start to get a bit of an insight, a different lens maybe on who you are, because it's coming down to, or coming into, this age of authenticity. Who are we? Now, if you're a generator in human design or a manifesting generator, I think this is even more important for us. I'm a manifesting generator in human design. I think this is an even more important question. Who are we? Who are we? And really exploring those themes of the first house in astrology. So what else did we kind of not get into in a whole lot of detail as it relates to this first house, which is in the natural sense, the first house is governed by Aries and by Mars. What I think is also interesting right now is that Chiron, the asteroid Chiron, is moving through Aries, which in a collective sense, and probably in an individual sense, especially if you have your Chiron located in the sign of Aries. And so Chiron is in Aries. It's bringing up all kinds of conversations and issues and challenges and invitations and opportunities for us to heal our sense of self-identity. That's Chiron. Chiron's the wounded healer. Chiron in Aries, it's all about issues of self-identity, how we see ourselves, who we think we are. I think that's playing a role as we see this new age unfolding. And so that's something to just add on or add into your consideration of what's going on in the world right now. So I've mentioned a number of times on the New Age Tour Guide podcast that I believe that this, quote, new age as it's unfolding is an all play. Everybody gets to play. Everybody is playing a role in how this new age comes forward. What it ends up looking like is going to rest and depend largely on how we choose to show up. And in a segment coming up, I'm going to talk about personal revolutions create the collective's evolution. How we are showing up in the midst of our own personal revolution. This revolution that is causing us to really look at who we are and how have we been showing up on the world? How have we been entering into the relationships with the community, across the community, whether that's in our business, whether that's with our clients, our customers, maybe it's our partners, our collaborators. Who we are is ultimately what we have to offer. Who we are is what we have to offer to the community. And so when I think about the community, the 11th house in astrology, that's where we find our intersections with the collective. That's where we take ourselves out of just a pure me, myself, and I type relationship and intermingle with larger groups of people that are that shape and influence the collective. So the 11th house is ruled or governed by Aquarius in sort of a natural sense of astrology. Aquarius is associated with the 11th house, and Aquarius is governed by the planet Uranus, everybody's favorite planet. And those two things are really, and Allie and I did talk a lot about this on her podcast. And so I won't go into rehashing a lot of those things, but there were two things that I really didn't talk too much about, which was Pluto moving into Aquarius, and that happens in November of 2024, and Pluto will be there for 20 years. Pluto will be there for 20 years. And what I didn't share on Allie's podcast was that one of the commentaries that I was just reading about this movement of Pluto going into Aquarius after having been in Capricorn for 20 years. And Pluto brings in the themes of transformation, rebirth, and renewal. Transformation, but because Pluto is what they refer to as a generational planet, it shapes sort of the collective sense of transformation, the collective rebirthing, the collective sense of renewal. And on Allie's podcast, we did talk a little bit about some of the events that were going to transpire in November of 2024 that could cause people to get very ungrounded, very ungrounded. And one of those events in particular is the US election. It could cause people to become very, very ungrounded based on whatever the results end up being in there. And so what I had shared on Allie's podcast, and I'll go into not much more detail, but I want to reinforce this here. The US, if you look at their natal chart for the country, if you run it for July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia, you will see what the US's astrological natal chart is. And you will see, if you look at the transits associated to that it has gone through or going through a Pluto return. So that country is in a phase of transformation. It is in a phase of rebirth, and it's in a phase of renewal. Now, how that's going to transpire may not be exactly what all of us would want it to look like. It might take more time than what we'd want. It might not involve the players that we would like to see. And it might not be, it might not carry the energy that we would like it to carry. But when we're going through a period of transformation, rebirth, and renewal, I think that we can expect there to be some challenge and some unexpected twists and turns. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And then the third card was Juno, and I really didn't talk at all about this, but I think that this card, if you look at this card, the theme for Heather Roan Robbins' partnership, and I honestly, before I pulled this card, really didn't know much about Juno, so I went and did a little bit of research around it. And Juno is about equal partnerships. And I think that, you can take this from the big picture, you can take this right down into the realm of your corner of the world, whether you're in a career, whether you have a solopreneur business, whether you are running a larger business. This is about equal partnerships. You're going to hear me talk about partnership, collaboration, and relationships, specifically relationships for the win, relationships for the win, over and over and over again, because I believe that this is going to be something that we are going to be taught repeatedly through this Pluto transformation, this Pluto movement into Aquarius, largely because we need to relearn some things. But I want to come back to where we started, which was the first house, because it all starts with us. It all starts with us understanding who we are, maybe redefining our sense of self-identity, maybe really reconsidering this hermetic principle of correspondence: as within, so without, as within, so without. So I wanted to do just a kind of a recap of some of the things that we didn't get a chance to talk about too much, because we wanted to really honor the intention of Allie's podcast and her audience and what was going to serve her audience best. So consider this a bit of a recap and a deeper dive into some pieces that I thought would be really valuable for those of you who are navigating this new age. This new age, which I'm going to start calling, for going forward, the age of authenticity. Authenticity within ourselves, authenticity in the groups, in the networks, in the associations, in the teams that we're a part of, and authenticity in the bigger macro picture of the systems and the structures and the institutions that serve and support us, like government, authenticity in media and technology and finance, healthcare, education, authenticity. And I'm going to talk more in a future episode about these 7 overarching categories that I believe are going to go through a massive transformation, rebirth, and renewal as we move more fully into this, quote, new age. Well, thanks for joining me for this conversation. If you found pieces that resonated with you, I'd be honored if you shared it with 1 or 2 others in your corner of the world. I'll also post a link below for the conversation that I had with Allie, kind of put these 2 things together. But the age of authenticity, in my opinion, is ultimately about the intersection of us, ourselves, in its most authentic expression, and us in community, where we show up with other people in groups, in networks, in teams. Also finding and being in partnerships that reflect a sense of equal exchange, where there's a respect for the individuality and the creative energy that is going into someone's contribution to whatever work is being put forward, and how that's also going to transform the collective consciousness, the collective expression and expectation of authenticity. Now, if you're curious about what authenticity looks like through the soul lens, you might be interested in getting your Soul Driver's Guide, which includes 5 key elements that shape your core value to the market and your vision for your business, as well as a Life 360. It gives you insights into how you can ensure that your vital energy is being used effectively inside of your career, your work, your business, and beyond it. And it also provides themes that help shape how you connect with your village, your tribe, your audience, and communicate your voice in a more natural way. You'll find a link below for more details, and I've also included a download that you can get with a sample of a Soul Driver's Guide based on Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple. Until next time, I'm Trish Murray, sharing insights and intel for navigating these rapidly changing social, economic, business, political, spiritual landscapes, and casting a vision for this, quote, new age, one podcast at a time.